Good evening. My name is Thurman Greco, and this program is called Let's Live with Thurman Greco, and it is coming to you from scenic downtown Woodstock, public access television, or the Let's Live with Thurman Greco YouTube channel. So we hope that you will enjoy it very much because we've been doing these programs a lot. I do have a very, very special guest this evening. And the reason I have a very special guest is because Sebastian Stuart has been here once. And the first time he came, he brought his book, What Wasn't I Thinking? And we chatted. And the hour was over, and he gave me a copy of the book, and I read the book. And then I hadn't been 30 minutes into that book, and I knew you had to come back. And the reason that I knew you had to come back is a very selfish reason. And that reason is that I have been trying to write for a long time, and you've been doing it. So I want to find out all of your secrets.
Well, first of all, nothing you write is wrong. Every comma, every sentence, every word is part of the process. So never get discouraged if you run into something, you write something awkward, something you don't like, something that doesn't work. Everything is all part of the process. So be easy on yourself. I would suggest setting some time aside every day to write, if not the same time every day, maybe the same amount of time, i.e. an hour and a half. And, those are kind of the basic rules. Really, you've got to sit down and write it. It'll be easier if you can get into a set routine. And everything you write is part of the process. Nothing you write is wrong.
Do you use your computer? Do you write on notebook paper? How do you write?
I work on the computer. It's just so easy to make changes and take big pieces out and put them back. And you can just name each document. That's the date. I use the date.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So every single one is dated. It makes my life. I didn't do that for years, but it's made my life so much easier. And so you just. You just do that.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. I wrote this thing last November. I don't know when, but it was about then, and then you just toodle-oodle back to November's.
Exactly, and if you can't figure out which draft has this thing or that thing, and you don't want to lose your documents.
Right.
So you don't want to, but you don't want to hang on too long, but you can sort of, if you save them that date, then you've got them and you can access them very easily.
When did you know that you were a writer?
I think when I was I always liked writing in school. Not that I was much of a student, but when I first started, I wrote a play when I was in my early 20s, and Edward Albee read it and gave me a grant at his residency in Montauk, and that kind of gave me an inkling. Maybe I could be a writer. But then, I've written everything you can name, literally: fundraisers, plays, speeches, cookbooks, travel guides, plays, screenplays, novels. Just lots of ghostwriting. I co-wrote a New York Times bestseller. No, I ghost-wrote it. I co-wrote a book that sold in 8 languages and was a national bestseller. And I ghost-wrote a New York Times bestseller. That's a funny story. They came to me. I would consider any gig that came to me. I wouldn't take them all. But they said this Park Avenue pediatrician wants to write a book about her practice and all the incredibly wealthy parents and their parenting foibles. And she would wear a Chanel suit. She said there's so much competition among pediatricians or obstetricians, I think she was a pediatrician, in the Upper East Side that you really have to stand out. So she had full makeup, Chanel suit, full hair, every day to deal with these crying, screaming, pissing, pooping babies. So we had great fun. It was called 24 Karat Kids, and that was the national bestseller in 8 languages. And this is a funny story too. The Times bestseller was a book called Charm by Kendall Hart, For those of you who don't know, Kendall Hart is a character on All My Children, a soap opera. She's not a real person, but the book was called Charm by Kendall Hart. And they saw her writing it on the show. She wrote it in about 2 or 3 weeks on the show. And then she had a party to celebrate. Her friends had a huge party to celebrate, but her other friend was in the hospital. Her friend Greenlee. I love the names in soap operas. And so Greenlee's having this huge publication party for Kendall Hart, and Kendall doesn't come because her best friend Greenlee's in the hospital, and her best friend is so much more important to her than some silly book publication party which no writer in the history of mankind has ever missed. So it's very believable. And so she's at the hospital room with Greenlee, who's in bed, dying or something. I don't know what she's doing. But, and she's saying on her cell, I'm not coming over to this party. I'm staying here with Greenlee. So Greenlee, the noble creature that she is, grabs her bedpan and says, I'm going to throw this on you if you don't go to that party. And so she did go to the party for the tail end of it, I guess. And but it was such a surreal, all these writing things are so kind of surreal and comic in hindsight, and actually when they're going on, because I'd never seen the soap opera. And I sort of assumed that the lead, Kendall Hart, was a nice character. And so I wrote her sort of nice, and I sent it in, and they said, well, we like it, basically, except she's a completely different person than you've written. So I had to go back and make her a bitch, which was really a lot more fun, let me tell you. It's always more fun to write. But what are you writing?
Well, right now I'm writing 3 things. I'm rewriting a book that I wrote on hunger about a food pantry here in Woodstock. And my teacher at Gotham, the whole time I was there, where he helped me write this book, kept saying, this is the wrong book. You've got to go at this spiritually. You have to, this is Woodstock. You've got to be spiritual. So that's what I'm doing. I'm writing a very spiritual book about hunger, because actually hunger really is a spiritual experience. And the other thing I'm writing, I think I gave you a copy of Healer's Handbook.
Oh, yes.
Well, now that one, I'm through with that one. I've done that one 3 times, so that I'm kind of through. But I'm now writing a book about diseases and problems with people's feet. And, you're a guy, so you don't probably have any problems with your feet, but women do such awful things to their feet.
What about the bound feet in China?
Oh, listen, that's
the weirdest thing. That's one of the 10 weirdest practices in humankind, is it not? They bind their feet, for anybody who doesn't know.
Women do
until their feet are these weird little tiny square oblongs about the size of a pack of cigarettes. And they do that because they don't want to run. The man didn't want them to run away. It's a complete control nightmare in hell. Yeah.
Well, women buy these ridiculous looking shoes and none of them fit. And if you wear them because you look beautiful in these shoes, you're going to end up with spinal and knee and all kinds of other problems. So I'm writing about that.
That's interesting.
And yes, I'm calling that Happy Feet. And
I
then
like the title.
yeah. And then the third one that I'm writing about is I'm writing about the birth of Jesus Christ.
That's a nice, light subject.
Well, I don't know anything about the birth of Jesus. I mean, I'm an Episcopalian, so, I was going to read it here in this show, and I did read it. But when I went to the bookstore to find out about, how the baby in the manger and all of that, all of the writings about the baby Jesus are for ages 3 to 7. And that's when I realized this is a complete hoax. So I have been spending a lot of time trying to find out what really happened when Jesus was in. But that's really all. I'm working on 3 things right now.
You may have too much on your plate.
Probably.
I would say.
Probably.
I would say figure out which of the 3 connects to your passion the most. Which are you most passionate about? Which are you connected with emotionally and, above and beyond the intellectual? And go with that one and put the other 2 aside. Because if you've got too much, there's a danger, they'll get all confused in your mind, and there's a danger that you'll get burnt out. So I would pick one. I don't know which.
I don't either.
Did Jesus have happy feet? Because you could combine two in one.
I think Jesus did have problems with his feet in the Old Testament, because Jesus was in the Old Testament. They wore sandals, you know. So they didn't have bunions. That much I know, but it was tough. You know, it was tough on your feet.
Yeah, I had my foot story. It's really boring, but I used to drive a motorcycle, believe it or not, back in my wild youth, and one time it revved up under me when I first got it. It slammed down and it broke my foot.
Ooh.
And it's been okay, but I went to this living in San Francisco, and I went to this fancy foot hospital, and of course they wanted to operate on it. There's a huge bone that sticks out like right at the, right below the big toe, and they said, you're going to have terrible arthritis pain for the rest of your life with all this. You've got to deal with this. And I was really I made the appointment to go in. And then I went and visited some crazy-ass hippie friends of mine, and they said, do not go near that hospital. They screw people up. They just want to do one surgery after another. For them, you're just a number. And so I didn't show up. I should have at least called, but it was back in the day. And I haven't really had any problems with it in 40, 50 years.
So that was pretty good. You got some good advice.
So be careful of surgeries on your feet. Yeah, I
agree.
Yeah.
I definitely agree. You only do surgery on your foot if it's, if it's really,
last
really,
resort.
really bad.
Yeah.
So let's get back to you. It took you. You were a young adult before you realized you really were a writer.
Yes, I would say so.
So what did you do when you were a kid?
I just looked out the window at school and daydreamed. That was my main occupation all through my childhood and school career. Then drugs entered the picture. I'm a 60s kid. I started smoking dope at, I think, 12. I dropped acid at 14 or 15. And so that kind of, I think, affected my development a little bit. I went to a lot of schools. I was expelled from the United Nations school. I was expelled from the collegiate school, which is a very fancy all-boys school that claims to be the oldest school in the country. JFK Jr. was there at the time, and so those two kicked me out, so you can just imagine. And then I enrolled in the New York City public high school that had been built, I believe, for 2,500 kids and had 4,100. It was about 98% black. And talk about an education. I got one, and it was kind of a fabulous experience for me, and I really loved it. And the girls had all these great names. This was before the African names, but they had names like Jaybird and just LeRae, really the coolest names. And so that was fun. And then I ended up at a boarding school founded and run by Christian Scientists, which I'm not, and my family isn't, in Connecticut. And there was a drug bust there. There was a teacher who was from the Midwest, and we were a bunch of spoiled, obnoxious, hideous, awful, rich kids, just the worst, entitled. And he was a poor, he didn't have a lot of dough. He was from Wisconsin, and he shouldn't have been there. He was thrown into an entirely different culture. For him, the cultural differences were as strong as mine were, going to a school that was virtually all black. And he snitched on us to the cops. He helped them get evidence, and they came one morning and arrested us. And that went down. And so that's kind of, I was like, bad boy.
Well, but that gave you some experiences to write about. That was fodder for your books, right?
Yes.
I mean, you can say that.
I have a lot of fodder. Yeah, there's a lot of fodder.
You can say that. But then, when did you finally... And today, I mean, if you write something today, are you working on a book now?
Yes and no.
What does yes and no mean?
It means yes, I have 135 pages, and no, I haven't done any work on it in a few months. So, yes and no.
It's not really striking a chord.
It might not be striking a chord. It's a good way to put it. So, it's a big endeavor to devote yourself to writing one. So you've got to think long and hard, And I'm semi-retired, so do I really want to, maybe I should just do some volunteer work and plant daisies. I don't know,
Well, But so you've got this 135 pages, and it's all on the computer. Do you do any short things? I mean,
Yeah, I wrote a short story, my first. Nobody Does Coconut Anymore, it was called. It was about a reunion of a group of friends who had abandoned one of the group when she fell mentally ill in college. And she still resented them for it, and she sort of calls them to her house to bring it all up. It's unresolved for her, the way they shunned her after she went to the mental institution. So, and she recovered completely and published. She was an academic, so. Yes, I've written stories. I would love to find a novel, something, that really... I like thrillers. My first novel was a thriller called The Mentor. It's available on Amazon. And got wonderful reviews, like really wonderful, and it was fun. And then my second novel was a coming-of-age novel set at that Christian Science boarding school. And my third novel was a comic mystery set here in the Hudson Valley called To the Manor Dead, that people seem to really enjoy. If you like mysteries and you like the Hudson Valley, it combines them too. In fact, I turned it into a screenplay, and the Woodstock Film Festival did a reading of it a couple of weeks ago at the Rosendale Theater. It was really fun. The acting talent up here is astonishing. And so I wrote that. And then I just finished my memoir. And, I used to do a lot of business writing for a guy named Tom Peters. Other people too, but he's this sort of business guru, and he's just wonderful. He's all about business, but he's all about people. And he is this very humanistic. By the way, I interrupt this program to bring you a bulletin in case you haven't heard. Dolly Parton announced this week that every single employee at Dollywood is eligible for complete payment of tuition, books, and fees for their entire educational career. And if you're a part-timer, you're eligible, and you're eligible the first day you arrive at work.
Isn't that fabulous?
Let's all bow down.
Yes, let us all bow
Queen
down to Dolly Parton.
What a beautiful,
yes.
She puts her money where her mouth is, and what a mouth she's got.
I think that there's a lot out there that writers don't really know about because it's not advertised. Like Dolly Parton does that, and maybe some of us will find out about it, but not everybody. And the same thing with Stephen King. He's got a fabulous thing going.
Oh, he's a beautiful human being.
Yeah.
He went on a civil rights tour of the South one summer. I mean, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
But...
Well, when we get back to your book, the one thing that really impressed me was that you learned somewhere to do really short chapters. Did you go to writing school? No. Are you going to say no?
I did not go to writing school. I took a casual writing. I went to San Francisco State College at the height of the 60s, so you can imagine what it was like. At the time, there was the biggest student strike in American history there. And police were on the campus every day on horseback and corralling the kids into circles, and it was really thrilling, and I know now important. The struggle was to get a Black Studies program started in the school, I believe. And so it was a good cause, but for me, I was just all caught up in the excitement, It was more fodder, but yeah.
So what you're saying is that you just sort of enjoyed life, and then in your 20s, you decided that you had to make some money, or you decided something,
yes.
And you put together your first manuscript?
I was an actor for a little while.
Oh, okay.
And I was in one Broadway show and one sort of off-Broadway hit show, and starred Pat Ast, who was an Andy Warhol superstar, called Women Behind Bars, which is a takeoff on women's prison movies. Very raucous, very fun show. But anyway, I just didn't have the chops to be an actor. I just could not do it. I was so painfully, as I write about in my book, unbelievably insecure, not sure of myself, just afraid of everything. I'm better now a little bit, but I said, I can't do this. And so I said, I'm going to try being a writer. And I wrote that one play that I gave to Everett Albee. And then my first writing job was in a porno factory, where we'd come in on Monday morning, and they would give us a subject, like incest in a suburban cul-de-sac. And we had 4 days, count them, 4 days, to write the book. And they were written on primitive computers, so there was no rewriting. It was like Braille. They went onto the computer, and you couldn't go backspace. You could not. And so, I once misspelled my lead character. His name was Brian. And your lead character's name is in the book hundreds of times, and I called him Brain. I wrote the whole friggin' book with Brain. And so they said, you have to rewrite the whole book. I said, no. And you could sort of squeeze sentences in, especially because when you had your mistakes, you proofed, you put them in, you put the manuscript over a light table and used a single-edged razor and actually sliced out a little piece of hard copy and put it inserted it. And I managed to insert the following sentence early in the book. Brian was so stupid he was nicknamed Brain. I didn't have to do anything else. So that was that.
So how long did you have that job?
I would say they let you come and go all the time. It was run by this supposedly mafia-linked guy, and who was queer, and lots of fun. And so I made great friends there, and a lot of them are still in the midst of wonderful careers as editors and writers and true crime writers. And so it was a really fun, lively, interesting bunch, and you sort of realized, gee, writers are kind of fun and interesting, or at least some of them.
So that's where you kind of learned?
Yeah, because I got a check every week, so I said, I'm getting paid, so let's see what I can do with this. And then I started writing plays, and my plays were not commercial, so I was always struggling. I was a cab driver, I was a cater waiter, I was a medical transcriptionist at the Hospital for Joint Diseases. I just had every job you could possibly think of. And then I wrote a few screenplays that got optioned, and even if they don't get made, you make a few bucks when you get optioned. And I got to work with the wonderful Lee Grant, a superb actress who has won an Oscar or two, and was blacklisted. And she made an amazing movie called What Sex Am I? And she was so far ahead. There's so much talk and so much action on transsexuals and transvestites and everything now. She made this movie back, I think, in the 70s, and it was a portrait of all of these very sympathetic, beautifully told, wonderfully directed portrait of this world. And she was just marvelous. When we went to her apartment to work, she'd feed us, and she was wonderful. And then I worked with Sandra Locke. Nobody probably remembers, but she was Clint Eastwood's main squeeze for many years, and then they had probably one of the most acrimonious splits ever.
Well, they made movies together for a long time.
Yeah, they did. She was his muse for a while, and she was fun to work with. And I wrote a play called Neon Tetra that got a little attention, and it fell into Madonna's hands, and she said, I want to do a reading of this. And so we set it up on her bungalow on the Warner's lot. And this, for me, I was so starstruck. Madonna? You don't get any more famous than that. So I flew out, and Lorraine Newman was one of the people reading, and Kevin Spacey, and a couple of others. And one actor there was all over Madonna like you wouldn't believe, like dirt on a dog. And I love you, Madonna. I love you so much. I would do anything for you. I would do anything. And she looked at him and said, would you wipe my ass? And he said, yes, I would. And she said, with your tongue?
Oh, no. Okay.
And everybody got kind of quiet in the room, and then somebody changed the subject. So that was a fun gig. And, I was sort of on the fringes of everything, but I did a bunch of shows in the East Village, and Michael Musto, writing in The Voice, called me the Poet Laureate of the East Village. That was extremely nice. I've been dining out on it ever since. And I just had a great time, because it really was free down there, and people would do anything and everything. And it was just a wonderful, heady, frothy, creative, nutty world, and some great, great talents came out of it, So I did a lot of that, and
Do you have any advice for somebody about, because like I feel like right now we are on the verge of getting rid of publishers?
Well, it's a very sinking market. People just don't have the concentration. I believe that the synapses in the brains of younger people are firing differently because they've been on their devices basically since they were 2 or 3, since other kids.
Or basically since they were 6 months. You know?
Yeah. And it's just going to change things evolutionary. I think it's a big evolutionary leap. And I forget what your original question was, but
I just, the relationship that one has,
Yes.
that a writer has with the publisher, I think that's just up for grabs right now.
yeah, it's like every business in America, really. It's all concentrated at the top, or most of it, and people aren't reading as much. So that was my main point. They're not reading as much, and so there's less books getting published, and publishers are strained. If you've got a huge star like Stephen King, you're in the money, but in the middle there aren't tons of people. There are some, so it's a tough business.
Well, when you do make money for a publisher, do they pressure you into writing more and more?
They do. My book, The Mentor, when it did well, the editor pushed me, and then she died tragically. She was a young woman, and she went out for coffee, and she had a brain aneurysm, and she died on the street. And she was wonderful. So, yeah, they do. They do want more. But I don't think people should, if you like, your books sound very publishable, actually, but I don't think people should worry about publishing when they're writing the book. Write it from your heart, write it from your soul, write it from your gut, write it from your nether parts, wherever you want to write it from, baby, you do it. What you're looking for is that connection with the material, so that you get up in the morning and you want to get back to it. And all writers, or just about all writers block at some point or other. Don't beat yourself up. Just keep with it. And remember, as I said earlier, nothing you write is wrong. Every sentence is part of the process. So, and try and have a little fun too. If you want to, there's a marvelous writing center in Boston called Grub Street. It was founded by a couple of friends of mine, Chris Castellani and Eve Brigberg. And they have all these classes. You can do it online. I have a neighbor in West Saugerties who just wrote a novel, a captivating novel. And I said to her, I really think that she wants to write more. So for beginners writers, Grub Street, I believe it's grubstreet.com or .org, but has classes in everything you can name, both for people who were hell bent and determined to be commercial writers, and they will succeed, but also for people who just want to write as a means of expression. If you go on their website, you can see it's all done on Zoom now and their business is burgeoning because of Zoom, and it always has been an incredibly popular place because the ethos there is just tremendously supportive and full of love. So I would encourage, if you get into a class, you'll meet other people, writers, you'll start to build a little bit of a community of writers, you'll get to know other people and you can compare notes. And I was in a wonderful, wonderful one when I was working on my memoir, and the teacher was she wrote her own wonderful memoir, and we'd workshop one memoir every week, and it was my turn to be workshopped, and the class was all sitting there waiting for her to come in and lead the workshop. And she came in, and she looked at me, and she said, "Take a machete to it."
Oh, wow.
It was very good advice. She was right on. And I leaned, and I pared that sucker down, and leaned it, and meaned it, and I think I like
Okay, so you didn't start off with all these short chapters.
No, I did. I think to go back to that other point, short chapters fit the modern concentration span.
Right.
In fact, they're usually a little too long, even if they're short. No, but they really do. I love reading a short chapter book because you can say, oh, I'll just do 3 chapters, and then you might get a little hooked and do 3 or 4 more and say, I've got to leave the house in 15 minutes. But,
Yeah.
I think it's all about the concentration span.
Yes.
Keeping people, engaged.
For a while, I was doing some classes in Albany with Marion Roach Smith, and everything had to be 500 words or less. And if you came in with 501 words, that was it. It was just nothing was more than. And I learned a lot about that. And I really appreciated your short chapters, because now that I'm working on this other thing about the spirituality of hunger, I have a lot of chapters that are over 500 words.
Oh no, 500 words is okay. That's 2 pages. No, don't obsess about that, and but do keep them short. You know it works, so it's good for you. It'll be good for the reader, you know. Yeah.
Have you ever taught writing?
I haven't. I don't think I've got the teaching gene in me.
Well, but you have the experience.
I did.
Yeah, well, you do. You've written all these things.
Exactly. Yeah. So, yes, it's true. I have.
And if you were to teach, what would you teach? Would you teach memoir? Would you teach playwriting? What would you teach?
I think I would teach memoir, actually, now that you mentioned it. I hadn't really thought of that, but it's such a personal... I'm fascinated by people's stories. When I meet people, I always want to know their backgrounds and what they're about. And memoir really plays into that. You know, I want to hear people's best stories, their funniest, their deepest, their saddest. And, you know, memoir is really a place where you can do that.
Do you journal?
I don't. Do you?
Not really.
No.
But, I mean, you know, that's something that we're all told that we should do.
Yeah. You got to pick and choose the rules. The ones that don't work for you, don't force them on you. I have one cardinal rule with all art that sounds so pretentious. I take that back. But there's one thing that I always think of, which is, does it work? 3 little words. You could have sentences upside down. You could have blank space in the middle of a sentence. If it works in the context of the whole book, if you've pulled it together, so don't worry about rules if it works. If it's not working, maybe a rule will be a great way to get to where you want it to be. But, you know, if it works, and all the rules are out the window. You know, you could write the whole damn book from the back to front, you know, so.
Do you meet with a writer's group?
I don't. I have, but I don't right now.
Do you meet, well, now, okay, can we kind of get this down to, do you meet with a writer's group when you're writing, or is that something you do when you're writing a book?
Yes.
So that's why you do, in other words.
And then the writing group is with you the whole way, and they really know everything is fresh, and they've seen the evolution of the material, so. You know.
I think that's important.
Yeah.
Alrighty, I was at Gotham for a long time, but writing the book about the food pantry, I got thrown out of several places.
Why?
Oh, hunger is it. You know, it hits you in your core.
Yeah.
And it really, when people think about hunger, if they've never thought about it before, and all of a sudden, here is this chapter that they're either reading or, you know, for homework, or that somebody is reading to them, that can go right to their, you know, they can have conniption fits.
Well, that's what you want. You want to move them and engage them.
Well, I didn't want to move them and engage them so much that they pitch me out. Although I was embarrassed about it for a while, and then Marion Roach Smith said, well, if you haven't been pitched out of a writing class, you don't...
Well, the writing class pitched you out, huh?
Yeah, no, that's where I got pitched out.
Wow.
You know, if you haven't been pitched out of one of those, you don't have anything going for you. You know, I mean, she was pretty cool about it.
You know, there's a resource called Submittable. I believe it's submittable.com.
Really?
And it lists every place that's looking for work. It lists contests. It lists who's interested in short stories, who's interested in poetry, who's interested in fiction, who's interested in whatever. It covers the waterfront. I highly recommend subscribing to that. I think it's free. I'm pretty sure it's free. Because if you've got your material and you want, you know, and people at Grub Street just to place things left, right, and center in these journals. A lot of it's journals. And it's a fantastic resource for writers who want to, you know, get some feedback. It is very hard. It's very competitive. It's kind of hard, you know, to get in these journals, but it does happen. It happens a lot more than a full-fledged book, and it's really a great way. Once you've been in a journal, you can take that to a publisher, to an editor, to anybody, and say, look, this is a published writer, you know. So I highly recommend Submittable.
Submittable.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's a good thing.
Yeah, it's a really good thing.
What about What about writers' directories?
What are those? I don't know.
Okay, that answers that one right there. That tells it all. Well, would you say that you have written more plays? You've only written one memoir, right?
Yeah. I said what I needed to say. There won't be another.
Oh, really?
No. You know, my cousin developed schizophrenia. She actually died in Kingston. Our family's not from up here, but it's very tragic, and I've had survivor guilt because she and I were so unbelievably close friends during our childhood. And the survivor guilt in some ways derailed me when I was an adolescent, and she got so terribly sick and I felt so helpless. And I needed to get that out of me and also tell her story to the world because she was a remarkable young woman. And anyway, so yeah, there won't be another memoir, I don't think.
That's
it would be
very
very boring because I've aged into being a very boring person.
I have trouble believing that. I really do. Anybody that's written as much and anybody that has produced that memoir is not going to have trouble.
I did write a lot of plays, I think maybe a dozen, and they were all done. So it was very rewarding to do a play and hear people laugh at your material, and it's really the most rewarding, one of the most rewarding things, for me anyway, or laugh or not laugh, be engaged, be caught up in it, maybe be moved a little, I don't know, but...
What about blogging? Have you blogged anything?
I
Have you
haven't.
thought about it?
I'm not even on Instagram. I am so pathetic.
Well, I'm not on Instagram either. I can't figure out how to work it.
I probably wouldn't be able to. I think Facebook is for old fogies, so I like it, but it's a fun way.
I don't blog on Facebook either. I can't figure out how to work that.
That's pretty easy. You just
I blog, but not there. It's just I can't. Anything that's got a picture that you have to cut and paste and do all of those things, forget it.
I know, I'm the same
There's
way.
no hope.
I know. Just have to accept it.
Well, it's encouraging. I took a writing class under Colleen Paratori in Troy, New York, and she's written 22 books.
Wow.
And in taking this class, I learned that the woman can barely tell the difference between a computer and a washing machine.
Wow.
It was so encouraging. It was so wonderful. She's gotten 22 books out of her computer.
Don't let technology scare you. It's ridiculous. By the way, quick plug for Troy, if anyone hasn't been up there. It is, the architecture there, a walking tour of their sort of central district is really kind of fantastic. And they have an incredible farmer's market, I believe on Saturdays in the summer. And you can combine the farmer's market with the walking tour. It has only one of three. It's got a private park like Gramercy Park. The residents on the park are the only ones that have the key. It's an Edith Wharton dream. And the Technology Institute, Rensselaer Technology Institute, has some great architecture too, modern architecture. And so let's hear it for Troy.
I love Troy too.
I love that.
I absolutely adore Troy. And
Has a great bookstore too, by the way.
It has a fabulous bookstore.
Like really a good bookstore.
It has an art center, and they teach writing and all kinds of other artistic endeavors there. But it's true, you just walk around there and it's just
jaw-dropping, some of it.
Oh, it is so gorgeous. And it has lovely history.
Yeah.
Albany's a big secret.
Albany has some great, this is very controversial. Most people hate, what's it called, the Mall? I think it's one of the great urban set pieces in the country. Yes, this incredible vast expanse, and then this egg, and then this other weird structure, and the fountains. To me, it's stunning. I think maybe in 40 years, or maybe less, people will come to my way of thinking.
Oh, I think it's luscious. I adore it. And the thing that's nice about Albany is nobody has discovered it.
Yeah.
There's a lot going on, but nobody really knows about it.
That
so everybody's
park,
just being themselves.
Yeah. The park there is beautiful when the tulips are blooming. What a show they put on. Oh my God.
Really?
Yeah.
I have not been there with the tulips.
It's really worth the trip. Yeah.
It's better to go there than it is to try to see the tulips in D.C., I'll tell you that one.
I think they have them in Saugerties too, but that might be chrysanthemums. I think it is in the fall. Yeah, there's a mum festival.
Saugerties has a chrysanthemum festival?
It does, yeah, in September or October. When do they bloom, chrysanthemums?
In the fall.
Yeah, they do.
Amazing, I never knew that.
There's a little park there called Siemens Park. It's really kind of quaint.
That's adorable.
It's adorable, quaint, yeah. So they have a kind of a tulip festival. I think there's some other flowers thrown in too, but yeah.
That's fabulous. This fall I have something to look forward to now. The mums in the fall.
Well, first thing you're going to do tomorrow is sit down with some tea or coffee and give some real thought to which of the 3 projects you want to prioritize.
Right now, it's going to be the Hunger Book.
That really speaks to you.
Well, I've just got to finish the dang thing. It's been sitting there, and I've been working on it on and off for years, and my teacher is.
How close are you?
I am now at the point where I'm putting together the chapters, and I'm trying to figure out which chapter is going to be accepted and which one is not, and which one is, and what if this one is too long. So I've got all of this stuff that I'm trying to organize, which is so much more difficult than writing.
Okay, I'm not going to say take a machete to it, but at least take a little butter knife to it and just go in there and rotor that damn thing. All these little loose ends, sounds like you've got lots of loose ends, something here, something there, something there. Go through, now you save it the date that you're working on it. So you're not going to lose what you had before. You'll never lose what you had before. It's there waiting for you. But what you want to do is cut that sucker down.
Yes.
Aggressive. Be aggressive.
Yes.
I had a boss when I was doing all the business books, and she said to me, I did some work in rewriting, because nobody knows, I didn't understand business. I don't know a stock from a stocking. I mean, I could care less. And they loved that because I wrote everything so that the lay person like me, an idiot, a moron, could understand it. And my boss was so thrilled because I was delivering these kind of polished things, and she said, be aggressive. And it was really great advice.
Yeah.
So tomorrow you've got to decide. You've got to get in there and do some rotor-rootering. First, so now at least, see, we made progress tonight. You know what you're going to do. You know which one you're going to.
And I have several chapters that I know that are just too darn long, and I'm just going to have to go in and take care of it. Yes.
You could take the chapters out completely and see if that worked, or you feel there's something in there that you really need.
And some of it's really brutal, and I just don't know whether people are interested in reading about the brutality of hunger.
It sounds like a very tough subject, to be honest, but if you feel passionate about it, get it finished. Maybe you won't sell it. Maybe you'll publish it yourself. It'll be out there. There's a chance
then it's done.
Then it's done. You've got to get it off your plate. It's haunting you now. It's eating you.
Yeah.
And so to avoid it, you're getting involved in these other projects. Jesus. What hospital was he born in again? I forgot what you said.
He was born in a barn.
He was born in a barn? Couldn't he do any better? What was he, poor? Or what was the deal?
Yeah, poor. He was born in a barn. He was, yeah. It was.
How long did he live in the barn?
Only a few days. And then Archangel Gabriel appeared to him and said, in the middle of the night, appeared to his father and said, get Mary and the baby Jesus and get on that donkey and get out of town now, because Herod is looking for you and wants to kill you.
You just explained more of the Bible to me than I've ever learned in my entire life.
Oh, listen, you just opened it right. You never even asked. Who even wanted to know? Listen, it was a whole...
So it's a pretty dramatic story.
Oh, yeah.
I wonder why it's so rarely repeated.
Because who cares? Listen, Bible stories are awful.
The book is too dense for me. It's written in that weird-ass language.
Oh, not anymore. Now they've got modern language now.
See, they've polluted it and ruined it.
Yes, they did.
Yeah.
Well, and of course, with Jesus, you've got Archangel Gabriel. And Archangel Gabriel is the communicator of all time. He is, of the top angels, he's in the top 3. So he's sitting right there next to God. and he says everything, and he's very good too, because he says what he has to say, and then he gets the hell out.
You're
He's
very
very-
lucid on this subject. I think you must be far along in the book. No, really. Remember, I used to dumb down the business shit so I can understand it.
Yeah.
Well, you can dumb down Jesus so everybody can understand it.
Understand it.
You'll have a big bestseller. I mean, I thought the guy was overrated.
Listen. Nobody wants to buy a story of Jesus.
Well, try Submittable. You never know. There might be a religious publication.
Actually, that's a good idea. I may do that.
I think you should. But
Why
all
not?
seriousness aside, I think you should consider, because you really were very lucid now, and you brought it to life for me in a way that I really enjoyed. Suddenly it was the stories in this barn. You're howling in the barn. Why is he in the barn? And, and I think you're onto something there. I think you're very good at it. It was very cogent, and, so get in there with that one.
It's certainly a new take. I mean, there are not very many people that have written that story that I have written about Jesus.
Well,
because, when you know the Jesus story, here's this 13-year-old girl, with the baby.
Who's a 13-year-old?
That's Mary.
Oh, my God. She was 13?
Yeah.
And she's legitimate? I mean, did she do it with somebody she knew? Or how did this happen?
No, listen, she
was 13.
was 13.
Did you guys know she was 13?
In the Old
See, you didn't
Testament,
know.
in the Old Testament, you still have this
Sounds
now.
like
in
Woody
some-
Allen or something.
Yeah. Well, it was in the culture when girls reached puberty, then they got married off. That's what happened, and she reached
I think
puberty.
that does happen around the world still. doesn't
It still
Yeah.
does, absolutely, of course.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why not?
Yeah, so she got married off.
And not only did she get married off, but she was married off to Joseph, and Joseph was not the father of Jesus.
Now, what's so great about Jesus? In one
Jesus
sentence.
is the Son of God.
Okay.
Yeah.
Whatever you say.
Whatever I say, right. I know the story's not all that believable.
It's
But
not.
it's been going around for thousands of years.
Yeah, it's a good moneymaker. We know that.
Yes, it is. Well, I'm not sure that the baby Jesus is a moneymaker. He's only a moneymaker at Christmas time when you can put the creche out there in front of your church and take donations.
Yeah, but people give a lot of money all over the world for him.
Oh, listen, honestly, I think a really good career field for a young person right now is the ministry.
Certainly is a dearth of spirituality in our public life.
Right. And it is there. It's sitting there, just waiting for people.
Well, I think you should get to work on that book. You can email me a daily update.
Daily update.
Think of me as benevolent, nephew of God watching down on you.
Well,
Did God have nephews or just the one?
Well, there was God the Father, and God the Son, and God the Holy Ghost, and Jesus
Holy
was
Ghost. Okay.
and Jesus was God the Son, and he was the Father. He had a human mother, and then he had this divine Father, and then there was Saint Joseph, who took Mary in, but Mary was already pregnant. She had already had her annunciation, and she had had her visit from Gabriel. Listen, you got to write about something, right?
Oh, I think it's really, I'm sincerely think it's something that really speaks to you and that you should write. And that
It did
you have a
speak to
very
me.
good voice for it. I mean, I like your voice. I imagine it on the page. Make it sound like you're talking to somebody.
Yeah.
Like a best friend. Who would be interested in all this Jesus stuff that I know? No, seriously. I just pretend you're talking to them in the most conversational, friendly.
You know what?
That's good holds for a lot of work. Make sure it can help you. I also encourage reading your work aloud, if you can get someone to listen. And you hear a lot. But you also, you want a voice. You don't want something that's written in some language that puts the reader at a remove, which I think a lot of religious writing is. So, you know, you're telling someone you really love or care about, or you want to entertain, this story about this incredible Jesus story, and you've got it in you to write it.
Well, I do harass my children. I have daughters in their 50s, and one's coming out to visit me in April, and I'm going to make her listen to it. And she, I actually mailed her, and of course the actual, there's only about 18 or 19 typewritten pages, double space. There's not much to that story. And
you have to talk it to her, though, if I can interrupt.
I'm going to read it to her. And,
Let's read it to her,
I told her I needed a cover, because, you got to have a cover. And she's an artist. So the poor thing, she's got to listen to the story, and then she's got to come up with the cover. I mean, that's kind of pushing it a little bit.
Well, I would let her off on the cover, because first finish it, then you're allowed to go get cover art.
Well, I have pretty well finished
The nephew
it.
of Jesus says that's what the order. Don't worry about the cover yet.
It's a little
It's
early.
putting the cart before the horse.
Well, that's true, but with children, you have to put in your dibs early, because you're not going to get a reply in 2 weeks.
Huh.
You have to say, now listen, I need this cover. And then months go by, and well, hey, how's the cover going?
Do you have an idea for the cover image?
I'm hoping that she's going to do a picture of Archangel Gabriel, because Archangel Gabriel was the one who made that whole story happen.
He made it up. He's the one that made it up.
He
'Cause
did
all
not
sounds
make
made
it up,
to me.
but he was the one who made it happen.
Huh.
He went to Mary and he said, okay, you're going to have this baby. And she said to him, hey, listen, I'm still a kid. I'm not even married yet. Don't worry about it. It's going to be taken care of. You're going to have this. You're going to have Jesus. Okay. And then he disappears. And then
Typical man.
Yeah. And then he went off to some other people. So that every step of the way there was Gabriel telling people which way was what, and then making off. That's what's so good about a communicator. A communicator meets you where you are, says what he has to say, and then gets the hell out.
It's a very rich story, and you do have a really nice voice when you tell it.
Oh, thank you.
So I would really encourage you, be aggressive on what you've got, get it honed down,
Work with it.
If you, since every day has a new label, it's a new file every day, you can cut a lot of stuff out, and then if you miss it the next day, right where it is,
Right.
put it back in.
Yeah.
What I used to do, a lot of times I still do it, I move the bulk of type or print or whatever, the paragraphs down to the bottom of the document. And I say, well, I'll decide when I've gotten through whether this is really needed stuff, whether this is worthwhile material. And invariably, and I mean, I've done it hundreds and hundreds of times, I don't think I've ever used the material that I moved down.
Oh, really?
Yeah, never.
So if you're kind of on the fence, it goes below the fold.
Get it out of there, and anything that slows down the rhythm. Rhythm is incredibly important in writing, as everybody I'm sure realizes, but it really is. You want to, and that's another thing that's great about reading it out loud. You can read it out loud to yourself too. When you hear a rhythm, you want to develop a rhythm, and you do have kind of a rhythm when you're telling that story. It's very straightforward. It's charming. It's not condescending. It's not exalting Jesus. It's matter of fact, which I think is terrific. So keep it up, young lady, and I want to report every day.
You are so clever. You would make a good writing teacher.
Really?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, stand up at the front of the room and, motivate people. I'll have to start on Sunday, though, because tomorrow is Saturday, and I'm going over to Maria's to read tarot cards tomorrow.
It's not going to take the whole day.
Yeah,
Do
I'm there
a
all
little
day,
something.
10 to 4.
10 to 4? Oh, my God. You
I
read
know.
people's cards.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
I know. Well, if tarot, you've got to read the tarot or just don't. In other words, you have to stay on top of your game or don't. Do you find that writing is that way for you?
Stay
Do
on
you
top.
have to stay on top of your game, or can you forget it for several months or years or whatever and then come back to it?
I think it varies for every writer, you know. But you certainly want to stay on top of your game by reading other writers that you admire, by maybe being in a writing community, maybe writing stuff that you've never written before, all of those things. Anything you can do that keeps your hands in the action is good.
You know, when a famous writer dies, then their papers, we're down to 5 minutes, we're down to 5 minutes. Okay, really quick. When I think about a famous writer and their papers being given to a university or something, I think about boxes and boxes and boxes of drivel.
That nobody will ever read.
Right. The good stuff went, got a cover and ended up in a bookstore somewhere or on Amazon or something. But all this other stuff?
Well, actually, I think that might not be true with all the papers, because what they're looking for is a sense of the person's life. You know, I think the universities that take these papers and they, scholars are interested to some extent. I don't think that many writers' materials are put into archives,
I hope not.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of drivel out there. Well, listen, we're down to just a few minutes. Have you got something coming up? Tell us about your book. How can somebody find it?
You can find it at your local bookstore. They can always order it. It's called What Wasn't I Thinking? A Story of Rebellion, Madness, and My Mother. And it's kind of I hope funny. It's got incredible early notices from some of the best gay writers and straight writers, and including Peter Cameron, who I idolize and adore, who's written some of the best novels, I think, around. So they can get it at Amazon. Go to your local bookstore and ask them to order it for you. And if you do and you read it, I hope you enjoy it.
I'm sure that anybody who buys that book will enjoy it. I totally fell in love with it.
Oh, thank you so much.
That's when I said you have to come back. This guy really knows what he's doing. You really wrote a fabulous book there.
Oh, thank you so much.
And there was a lot there because there was a lot happening.
Yeah.
You put a lot in that book. Having short chapters means that you had a lot happening fairly quickly.
It's an interesting story, I hope. My grandfather was an anthropologist quite famous in his day called Bronislaw Malinowski, and my mother was the entertainment editor of Life magazine during the height of Life's power, when there was really one magazine, one or two every week, and there was one TV show. By the way, fun fact, did you see that Ricky Ricardo movie?
Yes.
90 million people watched Lucy, or 60 million every week. It was, and 20 million people. Anyway, the figures were amazing. Retail in America, all the shopping centers moved the day that they were closed. Open. They moved the day to Thursday night because all the shoppers were staying at home to watch I Love Lucy. She just had enormous power. I wish I hadn't wasted my last moments on that. It's about moi.
Well, she had a tremendous amount of talent.
Oh, she did, yeah.
It wasn't for nothing that she had the whole world watching her.
No, it wasn't. She was very comedic, and she knew what she was doing as a comic. She wasn't, she was a smart cookie. And she founded the first studio, she and her husband, the first studio owned by a woman. And so. And
she was a clown.
She was a clown, and so.
What
were we talking about before that, though? 'Cause I think it was more me-centered.
No, but she did.
Shouldn't we end on me?
Huh?
Shouldn't we end on me?
Listen, let's end on Buy the Book. By the way,
yeah.
I donated that book.
Oh, you did?
To a library. Yes.
Oh, thank you.
I really felt, it's got to be out there for people.
Well, it was a learning experience for me. It's a small press, but I was paid, and it's about the sadness in my heart over my cousin and also over my grandmother, who was erased. She died of multiple sclerosis. She was Australian, and she was Bronislaw Malinowski's muse, and then she got sick and she was sort of made invisible. She's a ghost in the family. She wrote in books. They weren't in the house. There were no copies of her books. She had a very sad life, and she died before I was born, but I felt her. I got very much in touch with her writing it, as you know from reading it. So it's It is what it is.
It is what it is. That's what writing is. Thank you very, very much for coming
Thank
here
you.
this evening. And thank you so much, Ellen. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the crew there.
Yes, thank you very much.
We much appreciate it.